What's up everybody, Greg here with Lensprotogo and Lens Rentals, and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to be doing part 3 of our lighting breakdown on Game of Thrones. In the first part, we analyzed the footage to sort of figure out what they were doing to get the look that they got. In part 2, we remade that so you can see a full behind the scenes of how we actually reshot it. And then in this part, like I just mentioned, I'm going to be telling you exactly what we did and what tools we used to get this look. If you guys want to check out either of the other 2 episodes, they're going to be linked to in the description below, as well as at the end of this video. So let's roll the footage and our remake of this scene from Game of Thrones.
What are you doing in Winterfell? Or did you read every book in the Citadel already? What's wrong? Gilly? Is she alright? She's got a little son? Don't you know? Know what?
Okay, so we have a lot to get into today. We're going to be taking a look at the 6 shots that you just saw and the ones you can see on screen right now. But before we get into the lighting breakdown, let's jump in and take a look at some of the gear. So first, talking about our camera, we were shooting on the red weapon, which is total overkill for this type of setup. We just had it in-house, so we decided to use that as our camera. The main thing you want to focus on is getting a camera that has some sort of RAW capabilities. So either Canon RAW, Sony RAW, Blackmagic RAW, something that you're going to be able to use to have more flexibility in post with. We just decided to go with red because that's what we had in-house. Our camera settings, we were shooting at 23:9:8, so sort of a standard 24 frames a second. ISO was 500. Our shutter speed was 1/48 or 180 degree shutter angle, whichever one you use. And our white balance was 5600 Kelvin. Now this is going to be a huge key for this look to get that really warm light coming off the candles like you can see down here. So having our white balance closer to that daylight look and using candles as our key source, we're going to have that much warmer light that we want to get. We're also shooting in 8K, which again is totally overkill for what we're doing, and we're shooting with an 8:1 compression. Now this is a little bit important, but not really. We didn't want to go too compressed because we are shooting pretty dark, so we don't want to get artifacts in those shadow areas. So keeping a pretty low compression rate here is also going to help us out. Jumping over to the lenses that we used, we shot on the Sigma Cine Primes. This is the 50mm right here, which we used for most of our shots, but we also used the 85mm for 2 of the close-ups. And we shot these between a T2.8 and a T4, kind of floated around right in that area. We didn't want to go too wide to have too shallow of a depth of field, and we couldn't close down any more than that because we were shooting pretty dark using only those candle lights. So jumping into that opening shot where we dolly out from behind that brick wall over on the left and reveal these candles and our main talent. The candles in this scene are our key light for our talent. We don't have anything else motivating off of that, so we had to expose all of our light based off that. As you can see, it's giving a nice fill to our talent's face. We're getting some really nice separation from the dark background, which is just a black fabric hanging in the background, and then a nice transition from the front of his face, which is exposed off into the shadows, and where it falls off and sort of loses all detail into these blacks. We only have 2 other lights in the scene, right on the other side of his stomach, like right around in here. There's a couple more candles that you can see in the final shot when he backs away, just in the background as some lighting elements, which are a couple more candles. And then we have one more source that's coming in from camera right and lighting this statue in the background, giving us some nice reflections on this suit of armor, and you can see like on his sword right here as well. So jumping into our lighting plan that we had for this, you can see we have our camera down here, which is doing a dolly move from the side. We have our candles in front. These are our main key light candles lighting our talent over on the right. We have the statue in the background, and this is being motivated off of these candle lights, but actually lit by this light over here, which we had set up with a Westcott Flex 1x2, and this is the bi-color version. So we had this balanced to 2800 Kelvin to really motivate off those candle lights as well. We also had this dimmed way down to only 4%, and this was just giving us a hint of light on that statue. We didn't want to really expose for it too much, and because it is a reflective surface, like you can see if I go back to the shot, we're getting some really good exposure on it, even though that light doesn't have a ton of output. Going back to that top-down view, you can also see we have this sort of black frame thing here, and this was just the curtains that we had in the background. So we just had black fabric hanging. We didn't have a set that we were shooting on, and we kind of just rotated everything to shoot against this black wall. Going on to our second shot where our main talent backs out from the statue and sort of looks up at it. This was probably one of the most complicated setups that we had just because of everything that we were trying to block off using flags and diffusion and stuff like that. So starting with our key light, we had a light coming in from camera right, giving us this nice split on our talent, sort of going down and giving us good exposure on the left side and falling off into shadows over on the left, and sort of the same thing going down his body. We also had another light that was just filling in the shadows with a little bit of cool light. So we had that balanced to, I think, about 6,000 Kelvin. We'll look at it again when we go to the top-down view, but I believe it was closer to like 6,000 or 7,000 Kelvin. And then we had one more light that was just giving us a little hint of reflection on our statue, like you can see right here, just to bring him out a little bit. It would have been nice to have a little more edge on this just to separate it from the black background that we had, but this is what we ended up getting. So going into the top down of this shot, as you can see, we have a lot going on here. So starting with our camera, we're set up giving the OTS of our statue over onto our main talent here. Over on the right, we have our key light, which again is that Westcott Flex light, balanced to that 2800 Kelvin. This time we did bring up the exposure quite a bit. I believe we were probably around 20% brightness on the dimmer. This is shooting through a silk or some diffusion that we had. It's a 4x6 silk just hanging on a pole. And then we had a negative blocking off any spill from that light onto our statue and sort of anywhere over in this direction. So we just had a big 4x floppy set up there to block that off. On the opposite side, for our fill light for our main talent, we had a Felix Matrix. And we had this light balanced to 7,000 Kelvin, giving us a much bluer light for those shadows. This light was just shooting into this back corner, and because we were in a small white studio, we were just using those walls to bounce that light and give a nice overall fill instead of direct light onto our talent. Because we were bouncing that light, there was a lot of spill going all over the place, so we had to set up another 4x floppy just to block off that blue light from hitting our statue, which was very reflective as you saw in the first shot. And the last thing that we added in to get that hint of light on our statue was just one single candle. We originally had 3 of them lit, but we ended up blowing 2 of them out because it was just so reflective on that metal that we really only needed one to get the type of light that we needed. And that's just giving a nice little glow to the side and front edge of our statue. In the next shot, we're going to flip around and go over the shoulder of our main talent looking up at that statue, and he's going to turn around into this frame that you're looking at right now. Now, the main thing here was to try and get this really nice hard edge along his face, as well as getting a little bit of eye light in his eye, and then having it fall off pretty hard into shadows on the right side. So for this whole setup, we had 2 lights. We had one coming in from camera left. That's going to be our key light, giving us that really nice edge that I was just talking about. And then we had one more that was off in the background, bouncing up into the right wall and just giving us a little bit of fill for our statue and giving us that nice reflection. We jump into that top-down view and see a little better. So we have our main talent here. Statue is now on the opposite side. So we've flipped them around, still shooting in the same direction, but we've just flipped all of the lights to the opposite side. We have our key light, which again is that Westcott Flex coming in from camera left, and we've removed the diffusion here because we want to get that light to be a little bit harder. But we have added a 4x floppy on the other side, or negative fill, to block off any light that might be bouncing onto the statue. Then over on the right, we have that Felix light, and that's now balanced to 2800 Kelvin to match the candlelight, no longer the daylight like we had before. And that's just bouncing into this wall, again, giving us a super soft fill. And I believe we were only at about like 1% or maybe even less than 1%, really just giving a touch of light to that background. So if I switch back and forth between these 2 top downs from the last shot where we were over the shoulder of the statue to this shot where we were over the shoulder of our main talent, you can see that really all we did was just take the whole setup and rotate it 180 degrees. This allows us to keep shooting in the same direction along that black curtain wall that we built behind them to keep it looking dark, instead of trying to shoot into one of the white walls where we're not going to be able to bring the exposure down enough to hide it all. So that's going to be the setup for the first sequence. Now we're going to jump into where we have a second talent in here instead of a statue, where they're going to be interacting, and we're going to be doing some over the shoulders. So starting with this OTS of our main talent, which we've been looking at, we're now looking over a new subject that's in the frame. And for this, it's going to be a pretty similar setup to what we've been looking at. So we have that Westcott flex light coming in from camera right, this time a little bit lower, just giving him that nice eye light in the bottom of his eye, but really only hitting him on his left side or camera right side, and then falling off into shadows. We're also getting a nice little like Rembrandt lighting triangle coming over his nose. And then we also have a little bit of a blue cool light coming to give an edge and add a little bit of separation from our subject to the background, and add a little bit of edge as well on our new subject that has entered into the scene. So if we switch over to the top-down view, you can see we're doing a pretty similar setup. We got our camera over the shoulder of our new talent, shooting at our main talent. We have the key light over on the right side, that Westcott flex, balanced to 2800 Kelvin, still motivating off those candle lights. And then over on the left side, we have our Felix matrix, now balanced to 7000 Kelvin again to get that cool blue look. And that's just bouncing off of the white wall, giving us some nice soft fill light, as well as that edge on our main talent and an edge on our secondary talent, sort of separating them from that black background. So here's that shot again, and then we're going to go and jump over to the opposite OTS, so over our main talent, looking at our secondary or new talent that has entered into the scene. And it's going to be a very similar setup, but we're basically just going to flip those two, rotating it 180 degrees, just like we did with the first setup. So the flex light is now our key light for our secondary talent. We're getting a little bit of edge here. It's kind of falling into the darkness, but we're getting a nice eye light, and again, a nice fall off with some sort of Rembrandt lighting in there. And then falling into those cool blue shadows over on the right side. If we look at the top down between this and the one before, basically all we did was just flip it around so that we're still shooting against that black wall. So we have our flex light over here, now hitting our main talent in the background. And then we have our Felix light bouncing into the corner, giving us that cool blue light with that 7000 Kelvin color temperature. Now jumping into our last scene, which is a little bit different than the other ones that we've been shooting. And we actually had to do some work to sort of switch it around from what they actually shot. So we didn't have a big deep cave that we could light up in the background. What was done in the Game of Thrones shot was the subjects were actually left into silhouette and the background was lit up behind them. But like I was saying, we just don't have that depth or the set design to sort of give off that look. So we had to switch it around and light up our talent, giving them the edge and separating them from the dark background instead of the other way around. So as you can see, we have that light coming in from the right, which is giving a back edge to our second talent, as well as our main key light and sort of front edge, lighting up his chest here for our main talent. All motivated off of these candle lights that are in the background that we just have set up on small little tables with some of those rock platforms underneath. And then we have that Felix light off to the left, bouncing off the walls and then coming back in and giving us a blue edge on sort of the shadow side of both of our talent for this shot. Going into the overhead, we have our camera here shooting our talent, looking at each other in a profile. We got those three candles right behind them. We have another set of candles that you're seeing off behind our second talent. Both of those are being motivated with our key light, which is the flex light at 2800 Kelvin. This time we've brightened it up a little bit, but still keeping that exposure really low. And then the Felix over on the left, we had shooting directly up into the ceiling above our talent. So we're getting a nice blue shadow side on both of them. Again, this was only at like 1 or 2% at that 7000 Kelvin, keeping it nice and blue. And then the last thing here, which isn't super noticeable in the background, but we had a Felix P360 balanced to our tungsten light, so 2800 Kelvin. And that was just bouncing up into the background onto the curtains to add a little bit of texture and depth, but it's not too noticeable in the final shot. So that is the setup for the lighting of these 6 shots. And just because I think I forgot to mention it as I was going through these, the focal lengths for each of these setups goes as following. The first shot was 50 millimeters. The second shot was 50 millimeters. The third shot was 85 millimeters to add a little bit of compression and bring that statue closer and bigger behind him. Then the next two were also 85 millimeters, going with those OTSs, making it a little more intimate and close. And then last one, we went back to the 50 millimeter just to add that separation and a wider shot. Here's a side-by-side of the actual footage and then our remake of this scene. Let me know how you guys think we did in the comments below.
What are you doing in Winterfell? Or did you read every book in the Citadel already? What's wrong? Gilly? Is she all right? She's good. Little son? Don't you know? Know what?
If you guys want to check out part 1 where we analyze this footage, or part 2 where we go behind the scenes on how we actually shot it, definitely make sure to check out those links in the description or at the end of this video. If you guys have any questions about this lighting breakdown, about tools that we used, or any other things about this setup, make sure to leave those in the comments below. And if you guys like these videos and want to see more of them, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe for new videos every single week, and I'll see you in the next one.